Super Mutants are among the longest lasting elements of the Fallout franchise, being brought in as a central antagonist force of the first title and appearing in every game since then. Of course, there are many who think Bethesda has ruined the Super Mutants since acquiring the Fallout IP. Is that the case? I would like to do a quick rundown on the bulky boys. The types of Super Mutants, their history, the gameplay, and how they're used in each wasteland. Now, there are two main groups of Super Mutants separated by the coast. Each group of Super Mutant has their own subclasses in between them. Each Super Mutant is incredibly strong, has naturally high damage resistance, at least by lore, and are immune to disease and radiation. The West Coast Super Mutants all originate from the Mariposa military base. There are three main types. There's the first-gen Super Mutants, the Nightkin, and the second-gen Super Mutants. All the West Coast Super Mutants excel at melee, heavy, and energy weapons, and they all retain their basic body shape. The first-gen Super Mutants are mostly intelligent, but there are some exceptions, and they're mostly very civil. The Nightkin are mostly intelligent, argued to be more intelligent than the first-gen Super Mutants, but they do suffer from mental disorders brought upon their overuse of stealth boys. They can be civil, but paranoia, staring eyes, make it difficult for them. They are also highly trained in stealth. Second-gen Super Mutants mostly lack intelligence. They have a dog-like obedience, and they're the most common type of Super Mutants that will be discovered in the West Coast wastelands. On the East Coast, there's the Vault 87 Super Mutants, the Institute Super Mutants, and the Huntersville Super Mutants. All the East Coast Super Mutants have low intelligence with some exceptions, extremely hostile, and grow larger as they get older. The Vault 87 Super Mutants are notable because they are yellow and tend to be more bulky. The Institute and Huntersville Super Mutants are green like the Mariposa counterparts. They're less bulky than both the 87 and the Mariposa Super Mutants. However, there's a possibility they may be more intelligent than the 87 counterparts. Since 76 reuses assets of Fallout 4, the Super Mutants of Huntersville appear to be identical to the Super Mutants of 4. The first-gen Super Mutants and Nightkin were created by the Master with the purpose of establishing a massive, powerful army capable of taking the developing city-states of New California. The Master deemed the Super Mutants as the perfect race to survive in the wasteland. He called his army, his goal, the Unity. After the Master fell, the Super Mutants scattered. Some were able to take refuge with humans, though often faced heavy discrimination. Others banded together. Some ambitious types, like Marcus, set out to find new villages capable of supporting both humans and mutants alike. The Enclave arrived and took many wastelanders as slaves, forcing them to work in the ruins of the Mariposa military base. Many of these wastelanders were accidentally contaminated with FEV, creating the second-gen Super Mutants. On the East Coast, the Vault 87 Super Mutants were created through a joint initiative with Vault-Tec and Mariposa. The FEV strain used by Vault 87 was different from the ones used by Mariposa. Eventually, the Super Mutants grew to overrun the Vault in the downtown DC ruins. The Institute developed Super Mutants for the purposes of creating synthetic organs. Super Mutants were regularly released into the Commonwealth after this Institute developed them as failures. This lasted over 100 years. Huntersville Super Mutants were created by an experiment held by West-Tec, which involved dumping the FEV into water supply. This created the Super Mutants in the Appalachia region by the time 76 rolled around. In Fallout 1 and 2, Super Mutants were late-game enemies, high damage resistance, and carrying powerful weapons. For the average new player, combat armor was the minimum requirement, if not full-blown power armor, to handle these hulking squads of death. Rocket launchers, plasma casters, well, now called plasma casters, they were originally plasma rifles back then, laser rifles, miniguns, and flamethrowers. These guys were to be taken as heavy as they actually were. New characters could not tangle with these dudes. This stands in contrast with Fallout 3's presentations of Super Mutants, and while there's certainly a handful of differences between 4 and 3's presentations, largely in design, the overall presentation was pretty much the same. Super Mutants in 3, 4, and 76 are much more common, being regular, even early game enemies. While New Vegas is a lot more reserved about their use, the other titles have them scattered across the wasteland. I decided to give a small experiment a try. In Fallout 1, it is borderline impossible to tangle with Super Mutants right out of the gate. Attempting to do so will get you killed in a single shot. Meanwhile, doing the equivalent in Fallout 3 is not only possible, it's actually pretty easy. Of course, you gain a level by leaving Vault 101, so I stuck by the exit to stay level 1. In this example, I spawned a Super Mutant in. Using only a simple vault suit, a 10mm pistol, much like the Fallout 1 counterpart, I was able to handle 2 Super Mutants very easily. brutes, and of course masters, I found myself overwhelmed. This is because of the way 3 handles super mutants. They're bound to level scaling, meaning the tougher variations will only spawn when you're higher level. This, combined with their weak weapons, hunting rifles usually, make the early game super mutants pure cakewalk. They start at level 6 and have no damage resistance. Fallout 4 does handle this somewhat better. They're still early game enemies, no doubt, but they at least spawn at level 10 as a minimum and have some damage resistance. Doing the same, a fight using a 10mm pistol and a vault suit will be a lot more tough than a Fallout 3 equal, but still pretty doable. You can expect to end it with low health, but as the victor. Of course, the Fallout 3 and 4 tests are pure DPS slugfest, using the extremes of a level 1 player, the common 10mm pistol, intentionally weak builds, low endurance, perception, agility, and lacking any decent armor. In practice, players will be a lot more tactful, use better gear, and will likely have a higher level by the time they first rolled up to super mutants. Now we looked at history and lore of super mutants, we looked at gameplay, let's look at use. Fallout 1 used them as a central antagonistic force, held up by a grand interest that was built towards. Fallout 2 turned them into a normal everyday species. While you did fight some, they were reserved for specific pockets, so you got to know them more as a people than just an obstacle. They were no different from ghouls or humans. Additionally, Fallout New Vegas treated them the same as Fallout 2. Fallout 3 made them more common and able to be fought early, this time acting as a secondary antagonistic force, to the main being the Enclave. In many ways, they were more as props to explain the lack of build-up in the capital wasteland, rather than being any significance of their own. Fallout 4 and 76, however, their purpose was merely to be an enemy. Not the enemy, not anything significant, but an enemy. While it's true that 4 and 76 do explain the origins of the super mutants, they don't really add much to the world. They're just more enemies to kill. And that's the biggest issue. Bethesda brings them back for no other purpose than to be enemies. They hold little value. They're just raiders. Musculated raiders, but raiders. They become a common spawn and act like every raider you fought. So, did Bethesda ruin super mutants? Kinda. It'd be best to change course now before the next game. After all, there's always a new excuse plot, why they exist in New Wasteland, but they bring nothing new themselves. I believe that Bethesda's logic really only boils down to, this is a Fallout game, Fallout has super mutants as super mutants, without understanding their purpose and not seeing the evolution they took from 1 to 2. I suggest super mutants be replaced by another aggressive mob if their purpose is merely going to be raider. I felt the Moan Miners of 76 were fairly interesting, and I could completely buy them as strong creatures of their own right, though the weapon variety needs more touching up. They mostly use shotguns and occasionally use a missile launcher. The problem is, like super mutants originally were, they're region specific, at least tied to mines. A new game with mines could easily have them. Still, perhaps it'd be better to make a whole new species, not dependent on location. But if Bethesda does feel need to add super mutants, I feel they should only do so with 3 main points. There needs to be a really, really good reason to have the FEV virus in this new wasteland. To be honest, I think it'd be better if they use migration. For instance, DC is close enough to West Virginia that on foot a couple of days of walking could allow somebody to go there. It wouldn't be impossible for the 87 super mutants to wind up in 76. Number 2, make them purposeful, not just raiders. Explaining why FEV and the super mutants are there is not enough. They need a purpose. Why are they in the wasteland? Not why are they there by lore, but why did you, the developer, put them in the wasteland? If the answer is to be raiders, to be shot at, then you're not using them with purpose. They need a purpose. Whether that's mobilizing an army or acting as props, they need a purpose. And finally, and this is a personal one, make them strong. Yes, they're physically strong, sure. Individually, they're strong. But make them a challenge to fight. The weakest ones among them should be level 20, carrying big guns. That should be the absolute weakest. This will put them closer to the original interpretation. The weakest should be what the masters are today. And I think that would go a long way to actually making super mutants more presentable. But I think it would just be better to replace them at this point. Yes, they're iconic to Fallout, and yes, they're a really cool species of their own. But they have long outlived their usefulness.